say that. Okay, so we have 3 scenes for our series this morning. If you grew up in the church, maybe you're familiar with the story of Zacchaeus. We're going to walk through the story and look at 3 scenes. Town, tree, table. Town, tree, table. We're looking at Zacchaeus, but Jesus is kind of the main character of the story, and we're going to see what we can learn from the way of Jesus. One unhurried afternoon for Jesus changes everything for this person, this outsider, Zacchaeus. And it will actually change the economic structure of the community too. So we'll find that out together. Scene 1, town. Okay. Who would like to be my little reader? You don't have to be little, but who would like to be my reader? Who wants to read this out? Oh, thank you.
Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus, and he was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd.
Yay.
Relate to that.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Alexis. Now, the book of Luke is broken up into 3 sections. The biggest section is the middle section, which is often called the travel narratives, where Jesus goes through Judea, Samaria, Galilee. He's kind of going all over with this band of kind of misfits, a bunch of random followers of Christ, and they're sharing the good news every day that God's love changes everything. They're sharing this every day all over this area. And they come back through, they're crossing the River Jordan, and they're actually going, I should have put a map up here, but they're going through Jericho, and I kind of want you to imagine Jericho is right next to Jerusalem, so it's kind of like Spokane Valley going to Spokane, and they're coming through and they're headed southwest. This biggest section, the travel narratives, and this is kind of coming to the end of that series. And what Jesus has just done is this really cool story with this blind beggar named Bartimaeus, and we're actually going to explore this story. For some reason, I planned it later in the series. I don't know why. Because anyway, so he's walking through Jericho, and he comes across this person, Bartimaeus. Teddy gets it. What's up, dude? See you, buddy. And Bartimaeus is this oppressed person who has fallen through the cracks of belonging in Jericho. Our story today is about an oppressor person who has also fallen through the cracks of belonging in Jericho, kind of by his own doing. Passing through Jericho. Here's a cool painting done in 1935 by this artist, Konstantin Gorbatov. And that gives you a little picture of the scene. Jericho had these huge palm forests. It was known for these world-renowned balsam groves, which I learned this week would perfume the air for miles and miles around. It's kind of cool. I grew up in the Tacoma area, and they had this thing called the aroma of Tacoma. Are you guys familiar with that? Let's go! Yes, you get it. So it's not quite balsam grove smell. It's more like industrial, I don't know, glue. It's weird. It's not great. But Tacoma, I do love Tacoma. Shout out Tacoma. But anyway, this was a lot more beautiful scent that would come across the way. It was also a pretty affluent area, warm, wintry climate. It was a great place to be if you wanted to take money from a Jewish community like Zacchaeus did. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector, and he was wealthy. Zacchaeus' name is actually really ironic. It means, in Hebrew, it means pure one, righteous one. And so we'll have fun with that a little bit later. But if you grew up in the church, you're familiar with Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. I don't know how the rest of it goes. I don't know. I'm going into Old MacDonald in my mind. No, that's not it. But that song is, while it's kind of fun, it kind of gives the wrong impression of this person. It makes me think of him as like a really fun, like leprechaun or something like that. I don't know if you're with me on that. But he was actually a really bad dude. Like, we're supposed to feel like he's like a Bond villain, not this like happy little man. And so I want us to get to this place right now where we realize that Zacchaeus was actually a terrible dude. We can't take the sting out of him being an oppressor of the Jewish people. I mean, to be a tax collector, basically, he was a chief tax collector and he was wealthy. I think Luke is having a lot of fun recounting the story because it's so obvious to anybody hearing this. If you're a tax collector, you just are wealthy. It's like saying Usain Bolt is an Olympic sprinter and he's really fast. It's just kind of like so obvious, but Luke is trying to emphasize that wealth has a grip on Zacchaeus and is going to play a big role in his belonging and community. And so what did tax collectors do? Well, the Jewish people lived in the empire of Rome, and Rome was like, we'll keep you safe, you get to enjoy the benefits of being in this empire, but you got to pay a tax. And so they would tax the Jewish people. But they found that it wasn't super effective for a Jewish person to just hand over money to a Roman person. So Rome came up with this creative idea. They're like, what if we get Jewish people to take from Jewish people? And so they would find people like Zacchaeus who are willing to step outside of their community to become a trader, basically, of their community and take from their own cousin, from their own best friend's grandma, to look them in the eye and say, no, we need more money from you now. And how they would make their profit was tax farming, where Rome would say maybe, I don't know how much a denarii is worth, but let's just say you owe 10 denarii. Zacchaeus would say you owe 15. You actually owe 15 and you'd get the 5 profit. You get it. So this would happen a lot. So Zacchaeus was not just a tax collector, he was a chief tax collector. And this is the only time this role is mentioned in Scripture. And we just see that he's this, Bond villain. He's this huge boss of this scheme to take money from the Jewish people. And I think we're supposed to pause and notice that wealth can sometimes separate us from the kind of connected life that God dreams of for us if we're not careful. He wanted to see who Jesus was. He's so curious. But because he was short, he couldn't see over the crowd. I think he wants a better vantage point of Jesus, but I also think he wants distance from the crowd, right? If you've been looking people in the eyes for years and saying, I need more money from you, squeezing that money out of them, you're not exactly going to want to hang out in a crowd with them, right? So he wants a vantage point at Jesus, but I think he's also a little bit afraid and feels shame. So he wants to hide in this comfy sycamore tree. He's been looking down on this crowd for so many years, but once he's in it, he realizes he can't see above them. And so for our next section, so that was the town. Now we've got, he will be seen in the town. Not quite yet, but that's the first point. Seen in the town. Point 2, we'll look at the tree together. And I need another reader. Who would like to be? Anybody? Sweet. Say it.
So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, he has gone to be the guest of a sinner.
Jericho was known for these trees. They could grow to be 60 feet tall. They had these lateral branches that made it pretty easy to climb. And then they also had these leaves that would conceal a climber like Zacchaeus. It's interesting, as I was doing some reading and thinking about this, what does the sycamore tree represent? We're going to kind of play with a couple metaphors that it's a little bit of a negative thing, but I also want to have fun playing with the sycamore tree as a positive symbol. It's a symbol of getting closer to Jesus through kind of childlike faith. And so Zacchaeus, this grown man, is climbing a tree, and I want us to just see how childlike and beautiful and simple that is. He climbs up the tree. It's this childlike wonder that's drawing him up into the tree and drawing him closer to God. He wanted to see but not to be seen. He wanted to view Jesus from a safe distance, but there's no safe distance from Jesus' love. Verse 5 here says, when Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. We're talking about this series on hurry and unhurry and attention. And Jesus is going to say, hurry down. It's one of the few times, if not the only time, that Jesus will say, hurry. Hurry down from the sycamore tree. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. The other two times I can think of where hurry is seen as like this good thing in Scripture is where the shepherds are told to hurry, to run to this child, Jesus. Or when the father in the parable of the prodigal son runs out, hurries out to the son to wrap his merciful, compassionate arms around him. And in both cases, we're just told to hurry to the love of God. Here too, run into the love of God. If you can allow me a little bit of artistic freedom, I was thinking about the childlikeness of him climbing up that tree. And now I kind of want to just imagine he could just scamper down the tree. But what if, like, this might be kind of weird, what if he, like, jumps into Jesus' arms like a child, you know? What if we're supposed to feel that with this text, that he's just running so fast into Jesus' arms of belonging that it's as if he just jumped into his arms like a child. I love just picturing that. The world tells us to climb trees, stairs, anything we can do to get above others, but Jesus seems way more interested in climbing down and opening up doors. Zacchaeus, come down from your safe perch and stand next to me. Zacchaeus, stop trying to climb your way up to heaven and see that heaven is meeting you here. Zacchaeus, hurry away from your disconnected life. Hurry away from the fading approval of the world and hurry toward my steadfast belonging and love. Do you notice that Jesus, what does he call Zacchaeus? Zacchaeus. He calls him by name. This might have been the first time in a long time that Zacchaeus heard his name in kindness, with love. Hear this from the prophet Isaiah. But now listen to the Lord who created you. The one who formed you says, don't be afraid, for I have ransomed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. The public square calls Zacchaeus sinner. Jesus calls him friend. The crowd calls this outsider a traitor. Jesus calls this outsider a friend. He calls him by name. I was thinking too about like that name Zacchaeus. He's come back to that. That means like righteous one. And so, if you were a Jew in that time, you would think of the irony that Zacchaeus of all people, he's this Bond villain. He's the righteous one. But Jesus is calling him by name and calling him into his name as righteous one before he's even been righteous. I think we're supposed to see that, to notice that. Zacchaeus is still, up to this point, like the worst. He's terrible. And Jesus is calling him into the possibility of his name, like righteous one. That's you. That's who you are. And I think that's an invitation for us too, to call people into God's love, to call them by name, and to call them into the potential and possibility of freedom and life that God has for them. I think it's so cool. Maybe you've had that happen to you before, where someone will call you something that you're not quite there, you're not quite, you haven't quite made it, but just that possibility and belief in you kind of gets you across the finish line. I just love that in this story. Oh, whoops, I went too far. Jesus is standing with this outcast. He's seen in the town. He's stood with at the tree. And he's like, I'm going to eat at your house tonight. This is happening. I'm hanging out with you. My parents, I kind of grew up for the first few years, first like 5 or 6 years of my life, I was a missionary's kid. My parents lived, and we're helping start this kind of organic church in the capital city of Albania, Tirana. And they discovered this really unique cultural thing when they got there. So they're in this capital city. They got to meet their neighbors. My parents are both kind of learning Albanian a little bit and struggling through it. And they get kind of settled in. And I think there was like a pot of stew going. And I remember we got this knock at the door at like 5 p.m. My mom goes to the door and she's like, oh, hey, what's up? And it's this pretty big family with a few like crying kids and like just running past into the house. And my mom's like, whoa, what's going on? They're like, oh, we're here for dinner. Like, we're coming over. My mom was like, oh, we weren't ready. What? You know, and they're like, no, this is what we do here. We just bring a loaf of bread and just come over, and it's an honor to you that we would come to your house. Such a like backwards thing for us. And I started thinking about that more. And I think we see that. Isn't that crazy? Somebody try that this week to see if you're still friends after. But it could be cool. It could be a new way forward. We can learn from Tirana, Albania. But Jesus is doing something similar here. He's like, I am staying at your house today. And he says this to the large crowd. So you know what it was like in the middle school lunchroom. The people that you sat next to, those are your people. You know what I mean? Like this is my person here. Even more so in Jesus' time, if you were to eat with somebody, it was this sacred statement you were basically making that I'm with them. And now Jesus is not just saying, I'm eating with you, I'm also staying at your house. So he's basically saying, we're family. And remember, he's saying this to the crowd. And then what happens? All the people, we're used to seeing like the religious leaders grumbling, but this time all the people saw this and began to mutter. Can we all just mutter? Just to feel that mutter. You feel that negative energy? They're muttering. And they've been so mad. They've been placing their hostility towards Zacchaeus for all these years. But now who takes the brunt of the hostility? Jesus has gone to be the guest of a sinner. This is what happens when you stand with the outcast too. Sometimes you will receive those arrows. And this is what Jesus always does. He takes upon himself shame that people are experiencing. He experiences shame with them, stands with them, takes that finger pointing, that rejection. I like the Message translation. Everyone who saw this incident was indignant and grumped. I didn't know that was a verb. Grumped. Try to use that today if you can. What business does he have getting cozy with this crook? No one's happy that Zacchaeus is being accepted with such grace. But be they sinners or tax collectors, he's really confident in bringing God's love to people who don't quite fit in. Zacchaeus is watching Jesus take these arrows for him too, and he's just overjoyed to have him over. And so we come to this final scene, which will be the shortest of the three. Zacchaeus has been seen in the town, stood with at the tree, and now something's going to happen at the table. A final reader. Who's my final reader? Okay, final reader. But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is the son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost." Wow. Zacchaeus has just done a complete U-turn from who he was before. Can we turn to our neighbor? What tactic did Jesus use to create this U-turn in Zacchaeus' life? Do you know what I mean by tactic? Like, what has Jesus done so far? Everybody turn to your neighbor. Ready to go. Boom. Zacchaeus' response, this dramatic response, is a response to mercy. And it's so cool how mercy begets justice, right? He's experienced so much mercy, and now he's going to do this act of restorative justice to the community. Some of us, maybe, I'll speak for myself, I feel like I sometimes experience this fear tactic in the church where it was like, Jesus will only love you if you do these exact things, and if you know this exact knowledge. Some of us grew up with that a little bit. But this story and countless others show us that Jesus' love comes first always, and that our life is in a response to that love. So it's like step 1, unconditional love from God. Now step 2 is the wonder and opportunity we have to just respond to that. It's seriously as simple as that. That's me like really simplifying a lot of just the New Testament over and over again. God has done this. Okay, now just respond. God loves you no matter what. Now live in that love. Walk in that love. That's the way of Jesus. I like how he says, look, Lord, look at what I'm doing. This is like another very childlike thing to do, I think. Have you seen that where a kid's like, Mom, watch me. I'm about to go down the slide. And that's exactly the same energy that I feel in this story with Zacchaeus. He's like, look at me. Look what I'm about to do. I'm about to give half of all of my possessions to the poor. And then if I've wronged anybody, which is, he's wronged everybody. He's stolen from everybody. If I wronged anybody, I'll give them 4 times back. It's crazy. Think about what this massive redistribution of wealth is going to do for Zacchaeus. Just for a second, I want you to feel his freedom. Just look at me go. What's about to happen to him? He's probably going to lose his job. Are people actually going to accept him back into the community? That's unsure. His old way of life, the things he used to love to do, he probably can't afford his house anymore. Rome is going to be furious. Maybe they'll kill him. Who knows? Remember, he climbed that sycamore fig tree. Zacchaeus does not give a flying fig right now. What? Sorry, I had to, you guys. I had to. I'll probably get in trouble for that. But he does not care at all about all these this trouble coming his way because he has a new identity. At the table, he's experienced this being set free by Jesus. And we don't know what happened at the table for sure. Like, we don't know what Jesus said to draw out this U-turn. But we know what Jesus did for Zacchaeus in the town square. And we know this experience, dramatic experience of belonging that he's experiencing now. Zacchaeus used to feel like a small trader with a scarcity mindset. And now he's this child of God with this huge, generous heart and abundance mindset. He's motivated by God's love. Today, Jesus says, today salvation has come to this house. Salvation being the person of Jesus Christ. Jesus has come to this house because this man too is a son of Abraham. What is he doing by calling him a son of Abraham? We know that to many Jews in the community, for Zacchaeus to become not just a tax collector, but a chief tax collector, he was basically saying to them, forget you. And to them, they would have said, dude, you're out. You forfeited your chance to be called a Jew. You forfeited your chance to be among this long lineage of ancestors going back to Abraham. And so Jesus is restoring him back into the community. This is the son of Abraham. He belongs in the family. He is not separated or cut off from this long sacred lineage. And it's cool. I mean, God promised Abraham that his generations and generations would be blessing to the world. And we see that Zacchaeus has just done that. This act of restorative justice is a huge blessing to the community. Who knows what they're going to do with it? It's kind of fun to imagine. Where is that money going to go? Back into the hands of people? What are they going to do with that? What will that mean for people in poverty in that community? The wonder is so cool. And it all comes from just one unhurried afternoon from Jesus. And then it ends with this, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. That's Jesus' goal. And so Zacchaeus was seen in the town. He was stood with at the tree. And he was set free at the table. This is the invitation we have to be like Jesus, to create experiences like this as well. And it's because Jesus is so unhurried, he slows down to see, to stand with, and then to have a meal, setting free. this person who now claims his belonging again.